a humble dried fish salesman, built the colossal empire that now controls 20% of South Korea's economy and bribes its presidents. March 1, 1938. A modest warehouse in Daegu, under strict Japanese rule. With a family loan of about $8,100 in 1938, over $150,000 today, young Lee Byung-chul opened his first business. The place smelled of salt and dampness. His 40 employees packed dried fish and noodles for export to China. No tech, no microchips, no screens. Just wooden crates and a sign reading Samsung, 3 stars. Lee recorded every sale in a worn notebook, calculating margins with obsessive precision. He wanted his company to shine like stars in the night sky. Welcome to Plexo. Korea was a poor, agrarian nation. The founder understood something key: basic trade was the only way to accumulate capital. Selling noodles, Lee raised funds to move his headquarters to Seoul in 1947, just before the country split in two. When the Korean War broke out, he fled to Busan, where fish gave way to sugar. Lee founded the country's first refinery, gaining an extraordinarily lucrative monopoly in a time of absolute scarcity. That was the real seed of the empire. A conglomerate born not in an innovation lab, but on the streets of a fractured Korea, where survival depended on selling what people could eat. There's irony here: the future owner of Korea's economy started exactly where anyone else would have ended. (1961) General Park Chung-hee seized power in a violent coup. Park, a cold-eyed dictator in an always immaculate military uniform, had a relentless plan to industrialize South Korea at any cost. He summoned the country's top businessmen, including Lee Byung-chul, and offered them an inescapable deal. The government would block foreign competition, ban unions, and hand out massive, nearly interest-free loans. In return, these families had to build the huge industries the dictator demanded. Thus were born the chaebols, giant conglomerates controlled by dynasties. Lee Byung-chul accepted immediately. Samsung went from selling sugar to building ships, chemicals, and gunpowder. Rows of exhausted workers slept on freezing steel plates in Samsung's new shipyards, working 16-hour shifts under government guards. In the late 1960s, Lee decided to enter a completely new sector: electronics. He founded Samsung Electronics, assembling low-quality black and white TVs. He did so through a joint venture with Japanese firm Sanyo to absorb its technology. Nobody took Korean products seriously. They were seen as cheap junk that broke within months. But the state pact with the Lee family was key. It poured unlimited capital into the company. The government assumed all financial risk. If Samsung failed, the state paid the bill. That meant Lee Byung-chul could afford to lose millions learning to make semiconductors, buying the future with taxpayers' money. In total, between 1961 and 1979, the Korean state transferred a fortune to the chaebols, the equivalent of over $2 billion in subsidized credit. In 1987, Lee Byung-chul died, leaving the empire to his third son, Lee Kun-hee. The new chairman inherited a giant, but he was furious. Samsung made millions of products, but the quality was disastrous. Its mobile phones had a defect rate near 12%. In January 1995, Lee Kun-hee gave Samsung phones as New Year's gifts to his business partners. The vast majority didn't work. The humiliation was absolute. The chairman made a decision. The only way to purge mediocrity was through fire. March 1995. Gumi Factory. Lee Kun-hee ordered 150,000 defective phones, faxes, and other equipment stacked in the central courtyard. An inventory valued at $50 million. In front of 2,000 employees wearing headbands, 10 workers lifted heavy steel hammers. The headbands read "Quality First." At the chairman's signal, they began smashing the devices. Then they doused the wreckage with fuel and lit a massive bonfire. The flames lit up the stunned faces of engineers, many of whom wept silently. When the fire died out, bulldozers crushed the ashes. Kun-hee grabbed the microphone and issued a brutal warning. If they kept making such low-quality products, he would return and burn down the entire factory. That ritual sacrifice worked. The shock therapy transformed the corporate culture within months. Samsung stopped being a factory of knockoffs and became obsessed with excellence. Soon, it crushed Motorola, becoming the world's leading phone maker. $50 million destroyed to build a throne. Samsung's global rise brought absolute dominance. It achieved this within its own borders. Today, South Korea is popularly known as the Republic of Samsung. That's not journalistic exaggeration, but a stunning mathematical reality. Affiliated companies of the Samsung Group generate immense wealth. They account for about 20% of the country's GDP. To put that in perspective, imagine the US market. It would be a total monopoly. One single corporation would control a fifth of the entire economy. A South Korean citizen can be born at Samsung Medical Center, wrapped in sheets with the company's blue logo. They can grow up studying at institutions funded by the conglomerate, live in a massive apartment complex built by the corporation, and insure their life with Samsung Life Insurance. They can pay for purchases with a Samsung credit card, vacation at an amusement park owned by the Lee family, and at the end of their days, be laid to rest in a group funeral home. An existential monopoly, from cradle to grave. But this level of economic concentration created a monster too big to fail, and too powerful to be controlled by laws. South Korean presidents began to depend on Samsung's exports. It was the only way to sustain the country's growth. The founding family maintains absolute control. They do so through a complex web of cross-shareholdings. Its executives dictated fiscal policies, silenced the press with massive advertising budgets, and bought political wool with briefcases of cash in the dark. They became completely untouchable. Until a daughter, a horse, and a stable in Germany changed everything. The system of impunity collapsed in 2016. Kun-hee had suffered a heart attack, leaving his son, Lee Jae-yong, the crown prince of the empire, in charge. To secure total control over the company, young Lee needed a favor. The government had to approve a controversial merger between two Samsung subsidiaries. The solution was the same one his grandfather had used decades earlier: bribery. Lee Jae-yong siphoned millions of dollars from corporate funds. He wanted to buy political favors at the highest levels of the state. The physical image of the scandal wasn't a briefcase in an alley, it was a purebred horse, valued at $2.8 million, grazing in an exclusive stable in Germany. Samsung had bought dressage horses. They were for the daughter of a close confidant of South Korean President Park Kun-hee. When the press uncovered the corruption network, millions of citizens took to the streets of Seoul with lit candles, demanding an end to corporate dictatorship. The magnitude of the protests toppled the President of the Republic, who was impeached and sentenced to prison. Samsung's untouchable prince also fell. In an unprecedented event, Lee was sentenced to prison for bribery. However, in 2022, the government officially pardoned him, arguing that the country needed his leadership to overcome global economic instability. The company's history is a reflection of the Asian miracle, built equally on genius and corruption.